quickly recap. I think you can remember I did a study on this a while back. I think it was the first Zoom ladies Bible study that we had. We spoke about communication, and successful helping relationships are relationships where the people are respecting one another, they're caring and loving towards each other. There's a genuineness, so you're honest with each other, you are being real with one another when you are communicating. And then you're showing empathy, so you're understanding the other person and you're feeling with them. So how they feel, and at that point is you showing empathy when listening and responding to the people. And then paying attention, we just touched on quickly that when you are communicating with people, make sure that you're paying attention to that person, because it's an act of respect towards them. And ways that we can show people we're actively paying attention is we have eye contact with them, our body is relaxed, we're not all flinched up, our arms crossed, legs crossed, we're facing them. There's nothing more distracting to me that when I start talking to somebody and they like look down on their phone and I'm thinking, are you still listening? So what I've done lately is I just stop talking because sometimes they realize, sometimes they don't. But then you actually know if they're listening, they'll look up again. So yeah, you want to face them, and then you leaning slightly forward towards them, showing that you're interested. All your gestures are open and relaxed and towards that person. And you can make your face look interested. There's like, if they're excited, your face can change, being excited. If they're sad or being serious in a conversation and you laughing, like that doesn't help. So your facial features as well play a role. And then your tone of voice must be empathetic and accepting. And this, when we talk about communication today, it's mainly about if you and another person have a problem with each other, or someone comes to you with a concern. So it's not necessarily how we communicate to everybody every day, because you'll see later on, I will be sharing that there's sometimes when you communicate that you actually just, it doesn't mean when you're communicating you always have to be kind and loving, because a lot of times when we say things to people, I don't know if any of you have had that, but sometimes I'll say to you, that's not very Christ-like. And then I think to myself, well, Christ said many harsh things to people in the Bible. So if something is necessary, if it's necessary for something to be said, then whether it's kind or not, I believe it has to be said, but it can be said in the correct way, in the correct environment. So we'll have a look at that. If we look at when you respond with empathy, it shows that you're understanding the person's feelings. So helpful phrases that you could use to show that person that you are feeling what they are feeling would be something like, you sound, or you look, I sense that you're, or I hear your. So it would be like, you sound upset, or you look upset, or I sense that you're hurt, that the person understands that you, they can see that you understand how they feel. What can also happen if we respond like this is it gives that person the opportunity to then say to you, actually, no, I'm not feeling upset, I'm actually feeling angry. So they can then also start to realize what is the real feeling that I have at this moment. Other phrases is, it seems like you're, and then the feeling word, when whatever happens, you feel. So for example, when you kick me, or no, that's not a good example. I'm thinking of Ruby, but maybe it's, for example, when you leave your toys lying around, I feel upset or angry or irritated. Or if you're thinking of the specific person, you can say to them, when someone interrupts you, you feel annoyed. Just to get what that person is actually feeling like, that you can actually deal with the situation. It's important to use your tone of voice. I think you can remember Sister Sally's talk about women's roles in the Bible. she had that sentence about my son is home or something, or I haven't seen my son for a while. And the way that you say it, it could mean many different things. You could be happy about it, you could be anxious, you could be confused. There's many different ways when you are using your tone of voice that makes a phrase mean different things. The last thing I just want to summarize or look at that we used or that we looked at in that first class was another way of good communication is to summarize what has been said. And this is especially helpful when you now want to move on and get further into the conversation. A summary just ties it together. Sometimes someone will be telling you a problem they have or will come to you with something and they've like said a massive long sentence or said so many things that you're not actually sure what it is that they're feeling at the moment, because maybe it's something that happened 2 or 3 days ago and at that moment they were really angry, but right now today they might just be feeling confused about the whole situation, what happened. So the summary just ties everything that has happened or has been said together, that the conversation can move along. And it should also be done empathetically and reflecting emotions. So examples of that as well on the screen. The picture I'm getting is that you're overwhelmed because, and then you just reply what they said to you. So if I were to think of an example, that I'm feeling overwhelmed because I have a lot of work on my plate, and maybe the information I came and told you was I have explained everything I've been doing, but you can summarize it just to saying because you've got so much work that needs to be done, just to keep the conversation focused as well. Another one is what I hear you saying is that when, and then whatever they have just said to you, you feel distressed. Let me see if I've understood. You're resentful because, and then give the reason, summarize what they have just said to you. What helps with this is it helps to also make sure that you're understanding what the other person has said. Because a lot of times someone will say something and you think you understand what they said, but actually we didn't understand completely at all. My dad did the study last night about the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and just the way whoever the serpent was or is, the way that the serpent phrased something they said, it wasn't the full picture. So there was a broken communication. So if we take that as a lesson, we should be very clear on when we are speaking to people that we are understanding each other, because otherwise there's extra other problems that arise. Now, when it comes to speaking to people, or even like you'll see in the next slide now, when we're problem solving, if I'm going to go to someone and I have a problem with them, or there's something that's bugging me, I can't control what they're going to say to me or what they're going to reply to me, but I do have control over what I'm going to say to them and over how I'm going to say it to them. And what's really good is a lot of times to make sure that the timing is correct. So when you're going to say something to them, that it's not in the heat of a discussion or in the heat of the moment, but that you've actually had time to go and think about it before you speak. So this is now some new information that we didn't look at in the first class, is problem-solving communication. The person who is bugged owns the problem, meaning that if there's something that is bugging me, then I own the problem. It's not anybody else's problem. I need to make sure I can raise whatever is bugging me with whoever it is bugging me. I can raise that the problem with them to be able to be sorted out. Because it's my problem, nobody else knows about it, so they can't take responsibility for it anyway. If something bugs you, you own the problem, and it's not necessarily my problem, but I am there to be able to listen to your problem. I'll show you now what we can do about all these different scenarios. If something bugs us, then we own the problem. And if something bugs them, they own the problem. So once we know who owns the problem, we then know what we can do about it. It's no use somebody else has a problem, like actually we wouldn't know. If somebody else has a problem with me, I don't know until they actually come and tell me. So let's have a look what we can do with each scenario. If something bugs me and I own the problem, what I can do is I can send an iMessage to that person, and I can either phone them or send it in a text, send it in an email, or if there's no lockdown, I can go to the person and say the iMessage. But what's nice about this is you've thought it through before you're just going to go and attack them and say something. So we don't want to attack people or judge or point fingers or blame. We just want to state how we are feeling because of whatever is bugging us. You can possibly set limits and then initiate a problem-solving process, which I'm going to touch on the next slide. So don't worry if you're not too sure where I'm coming from. If something bugs you and you own the problem, then I need to actively listen to you. I can empathize with you, and I can possibly offer information, ideas, or suggestions that might help the problem, that we can solve it. If it bugs us, then we can choose whether to get involved or not. We might decide to actively listen, and then we can also initiate a problem-solving process. And I'll also explain the problem-solving process, because you can see that's why you communicate with people if you have a problem, because you want to get a solution. You want to solve that problem. If something bugs them, they own the problem, and then we can collaboratively solve the problem together. And I know this is just communication skills in general, but what's great about this is we can actually learn from it and then apply it in our different meetings or church settings. Even if we I'm just thinking of like a woman at the well. We had a woman at the well many years ago, and there were like a couple ladies there who had many problems. And if we just knew how to communicate it better and stick to the actual problem and not then badmouth people or let feelings be involved, it could have had a better outcome, the solving of the problem. So that's my idea, is that we can possibly, if you feel it would work, use it in the setting where you are. So an iMessage, it always is in these three parts. You want to go to the person and say when, and then you describe the situation. So for example, when you mess up the kitchen, I feel annoyed, right? It's how I feel right now. And you want to accurately get exactly how you're feeling right then, because I have spent a lot of time cleaning the kitchen yesterday, or I spent a lot of time, or it took me hard work to get the kitchen clean. So the because part, you have a concrete effect on you. Meaning, if you look at the bottom there, it's either taking up some of your time, some of your energy, it's harming your property or like something that you own, or it is endangering somebody or yourself. It's not a values thing where it's just when you dirty the kitchen, I feel annoyed because I want a clean kitchen. That's like your opinion, and it doesn't show that person that it's hurt, or it's taken up more of your energy or more of your time, or even, I'm just thinking of an example now. If you have a child and you say, when you throw your plates on the floor, I feel angry because now you broke something and I need to go and buy a new plate. So it's costing you money. So you can explain if you have a problem, you go to somebody and you explain it to them in this way, that they can see exactly how you're feeling and why you're feeling it. And then you need to be open for any kind of response. They might respond with just being, it might be a positive response, or it might be they don't know what to say, so they just leave it, but at least they know how you're feeling about the situation. And when I spoke earlier about then setting limits, it just means to stay at the main point of the problem. So if we just take that problem again, about when you dirty the kitchen, I feel annoyed because I have spent a lot of time cleaning it this morning. I would like it if you could just help keep the kitchen clean. So that's where you're setting the limit about you want to keep the kitchen clean. And if they then reply and saying, oh, but it wasn't me, or no, but I didn't really make too much of a mess, or it's not a big problem to them, at least you can explain to them it's a big problem to you. You would like it if the kitchen could be clean. And then, like I said in the previous slide, we're going to problem solving mode, where you can then say to everybody involved, let's sit together and brainstorm some ideas of how to solve this problem, that we don't have this happen again. And what's nice is with problem solving, you can write it all down, all the different ideas. So instead of someone giving an idea and somebody immediately saying, no, that's not going to work, or no, this is going to be, no judging of any problem solving idea. We have what the problem is, what we want to solve, and then we are going to brainstorm. So anybody can give ideas, whether it's silly ideas, crazy ideas, doesn't matter. Everybody can give ideas. It gets written down. Once we've written down all the different ideas that have come up to solve the problem, then we can now go through them one by one and say, okay, do you think this would work if we implement it? And then people can start saying yes or no, or start seeing what is going to work best to solve the problem. So I'm hoping this is making some kind of sense. So that's just on a practical note of how we could communicate with people, especially with problem solving. So if we now go look at some verses in the Bible, when it comes to speaking or raising your opinion or communicating, Proverbs has quite a lot of them. And I think Mom would also know that because of all the word studies we've done in Proverbs. But Proverbs 18 verses 2 and then verses 13, fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. So that just makes me think of that right in the beginning, where if you aren't listening to understand what that person is saying, then it's foolish of us. We want to rather understand, be wise and understand. Verse 13, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame. So I know a lot of people have felt this before, or maybe we are even in the wrong about this, that when someone's talking to you, you're already thinking of what you want to answer before listening. And a lot of times that just creates more problems than just listening and hearing what the person has said and then replying back to them. So that verse there, to answer before listening, that's folly and shame. If we take that practical example of where we said answer with empathy, so you're listening to them and then you say, all right, it sounds like you're annoyed because your daughter only came home after 12 o'clock at night. And then the person can say, no, I'm not annoyed, I was worried. So now you've heard, okay, actually they viewing the situation completely differently to what I am. And then you can work on them and talk to them about how they're feeling worried rather than annoyed. Proverbs 12 verse 18, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And this is just to also, we need to think of what we say. And I know there's this quote that goes around about before you speak, think of the word kind. Like, is it something? Is it necessary? Is it, I can't remember exactly what that acronym was for.
Is it helpful? Yeah.
Yeah, is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it, yeah. Helpful. Maybe someone who can think of it can mention it or speak up later. But it's just, you don't want to unnecessarily hurt somebody by recklessly saying things. And a lot of times when we are angry, that's why we want to wait before we speak. But when we are angry, we can easily blame people or start bad-mouthing them instead of sticking to the actual problem and thinking about it. Okay, yeah, so it says before you speak, you want to think. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Thanks, Mom. And then Proverbs 18, verse 21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. So I've always been very conscious about this, that what you say can either break up a relationship or it can build it and make it stronger. It can even break a person's life or make or break it. Like they said that if someone is so down and out and they feel depressed, we don't always know what people are feeling right then and there. So in that kind of situation, rather be kind, and make sure that it's really necessary when you are going to speak. If you are going to speak harsh words or words that might be not as kind, but it is necessary to say, make sure that you know the situation is correct. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. That's in Colossians 4, verses 6. Proverbs 15, verse 1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stirs up anger. And this is where I also started to think about, like I mentioned in the beginning, when Jesus spoke, especially because a lot of times people will say, no, if you speak in a certain way, it's not very Christ-like. But he sometimes had a lot of harsh words to say when he called the Pharisees and I think it was the Sadducees, but the Pharisees, he would call them hypocrites and you brood of vipers, and like very mean things and very harsh words. And it did stir up anger, but it made people think like those words were necessary to be spoken. It's no good you never speak up or never say things that might not be kind. You'll see if there's a greater purpose that is involved. So Jesus spoke harsh words at times, and I feel, and the verses that I have gone and looked up, it's when it was God's plan that was being affected. If we think of that verse where Jesus said to Peter, get you behind me, Satan. Like that's mean. That was like harsh to call Peter a Satan, someone who's standing up against me. But he had to say it because he knew that God's plan needed to unfold and it had to go that course. So he had to speak like that to him. And also when there's a greater purpose than one's own personal feelings, there's also harsh words, or I can't think of another good word. I'm not really communicating well here, hey? But it's like words that are necessary, but they might not be the kindest of words. An example that I just thought of as well when I was going through this was, there was this father and mother whose daughter was now getting married, but she's getting married to a lady. So this daughter really wants her dad to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. And the father said he's not going to because he doesn't believe what she's doing is right. And she would say to him, it's not very Christ-like and it's not very loving because you should love me with no, what do you call it? Like conditions, no conditions. You should love me no matter what. But he knows that there's a greater purpose here. Like there's a greater thing that is being lost by me going against God's way. If I let my daughter get married to another woman, God doesn't like that. He doesn't believe that. So this father was rather harsh to his daughter, and he decided to not go to the wedding because he knows there's actually a greater thing that she's missing out on in the future by not living a life according to God's purpose. So it's not his personal feelings that he's just like, I don't like what you're doing, so he was giving all these harsh words. No, he was taking it from, it's written in God's book, it's scripture. This is what God wants us to do. And he spoke those words to her. And that just makes me think of my dad's Bible class again last night, where he spoke and he said that whenever Jesus was saying something or replying something to someone, he says, it is written, or haven't you read, or haven't you read that what was in scripture? And he would quote what God's plan was in God's thing. So yeah, just something to think about on the side. Then Proverbs 15 verse 2, the tongue of the wise adorns knowledge, but the mouth of a fool gushes folly. And gushes makes me just think of like the dam wall that has been opened and the water just gushes through. There's no real looking what water drop is passing by. So same with our mouths. We need to make sure we're seeing which words are leaving our mouths and not just say things and without looking what's coming out. And then Proverbs 29 verse 11, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. So that just, again, be slow to reply. Think of the correct thing to say, and also the right time to say something is very important. So again, if we think of now the problem solving or how we speak to people in a situation where they might have come to us with a problem, or we might have a problem with someone, not to let your emotions get involved. Yes, there are emotions involved, but try and focus on the actual problem that's there. We need to voice what our emotions and feelings are, but not ponder on them and start getting bitter and annoyed and angry and speak out of anger or bitterness, or usually then you don't have control about what's coming out. And then a wise man quietly holds back. This makes me think of the story of when Jesus was, he went to cleanse the temple, and he must have been sitting there quietly holding back, thinking it through, and then he went to the temple and really told the people that it's unacceptable what they're doing. Because I don't know who did this Bible study, but it was about the whip that he took, and he was like weaving that. So that must have taken a while for him to do, that he could now think about what he was doing before he actually went out to the temple. So just to finish off, words can hurt or they can encourage. They can teach or they can tear down. But no matter what they are very powerful. They are also a huge reflection of what is in our heart. And again, this brings me back to what was in Jesus's heart. He was always thinking of God's plan and how that was going to be fulfilled. And if someone was not agreeing with it, or they were preaching falsely, or they were doing things that weren't in accordance to God's plan, then he would speak up about it. So it was a reflection of what was in his heart, whether it was harsh words or whether it was kind words. It's words that were important to have been said. And I think we can also learn from that a lot of times the most important conversations are the most difficult to have, but they're important to have in order for that relationship to continue on further. So in Philippians 4 verse 8, we read, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And I want to end off there because we want to have those things in our hearts, that when we are replying to somebody or we are responding or communicating with people, that we think of the truth and the honorable thing to do, what's just and pure and lovely, what's going to be commendable, and what's going to be excellent. Think of those things and then also apply it into our communication skills with other people.